Hello and welcome to this Unit 1 overview for the Pflaum Gospel Weeklies. My name is Nicole Check and I'm Senior Editor for the Pflaum Gospel Weeklies. I work primarily on Venture, which is our level for 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, as well as on Visions, which is for 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. We come to the start of the 2020-2021 catechetical year in a strange, unsettled place after months of living with the COVID epidemic. And you may be at this moment preparing for a very different looking program or religion class than you're used to. And I just wanted to share that I feel that same uncertainty as I prepare my own kids to go off to school this fall. However, as I worked on the Visions lessons this spring, I was comforted more than once by the gospel messages that we share in the first 8 lessons of Unit 1. Like so many of the stories in the Gospels, the stories that we share this fall apply directly to the issues that we are currently facing. Specifically, how do we live fairly and justly, and how are we to live both as good Christians and as good citizens? And how do we love our God and our neighbor? These being the Great Commandments. Before we begin with the Unit 1 lessons, though, I want to address if your program starts before the first regular Pflaum lesson on the 25th Sunday of Ordinary Time, there are 3 early start lessons available online for all Pflaum customers at gospelweeklies.com. Again, these are free online lessons that you can download and print. Each one of them is different than a regular lesson during one of the 32 regular lessons in the program because it covers a general topic. It's not tied to a particular Sunday gospel. They include one lesson is a Bible overview, another is an introduction specifically to the Gospels, and third, there's a lesson on prayer. These lessons are not dependent on each other and may be taught in any order, and you don't have to teach all 3. You can choose whichever one you want, whatever you have need for. Next, just another general note regarding prayer space. Whether you're meeting in a typical classroom setting, either in a school or in a parish, or you're teaching at home, you will want to prepare a prayer space for gathering and closing prayer in each lesson, as well as for proclaiming the gospel. And the space can be simple. Gather a Bible, a candle and lighter or matches, a cross or crucifix, and a small cloth in that Sunday's liturgical color, which you can find at the bottom band of the cover of every lesson. So you see here we start out in Ordinary Time, so we have a green band. You know, a small piece of colored felt works well for this purpose. It's easy to switch it out. Regarding the prayer space in general, give the students the responsibility to set up this prayer space. Before you begin, let's gather the components that you need. Obviously, if you have your lessons in front of you, we'll be going through them page by page. So if you don't have them, you can just follow along with me. The next item that I'll be referring to is the Children's Catechism Handbook, which is what the church believes and teaches. If I accidentally slip up and call it the WCBT, so what the church believes and teaches, you'll know what I'm referring to. So there is a portion of this manual, of this handbook in every lesson. So you will need these books each week. Next, the third component is the teaching guide. And here you have 2 options. We either have the standard teaching guide that has a 4-page lesson plan for each week, or we have the simplified version this year. We specifically designed this for parents who will be teaching at home, but really anyone is welcome to use it. It's available. This parent teaching page is available, one for each lesson. Is available online in our family and parent and family resources section of gospelweeklies.com. So you'll find that there and you can print it out. What's really nice here is if you don't teach the lesson all in one sitting, you can just check off the different items as you complete them and then just pick up where you left off when you come the next day or later that week. All right, another note about lessons in general, if you get the lesson in front of you, we typically teach, these are 8-page lessons every week. We typically teach cover to cover, pages 1 through 8 in order, typically. And if we have to switch that up a little bit because we've got a game board on the back or a cutout activity or something like that, that'll be indicated in the lesson, or excuse me, in the teaching guide. All right. A note to parents who are preparing to teach at home, at least for the fall, if not for the entire 2021 year. Just want to talk a little bit, just kind of in general, about how to adapt these lessons. Many things in these lessons are taught presuming a classroom of at least, 10 people or as many as 25. Just a little bit in terms of things like games, that you may want to bring in other family members to play games. Same things for taking turns in reading the stories, the Sunday Gospel, or if there are plays in reader parts, as many family members as you can incorporate in that, or you may just have to take multiple roles. Let's see. All right, let's start with the first lesson for Unit 1. This is Visions 1 for September 20th, 2020, the 25th Sunday in Ordinary Time. The theme for this lesson is God's love abounds. God's love is for everyone. Let's spend some time, for most classes, this is going to be the first time that they're meeting. So we have an ice-breaking activity on the cover. Give the children the opportunity to move about the room, and the idea is that they will, when they find somebody who has done any of these items, that they can just put their initials, and once they've got 4 in a row, they win. Let's see. And if you want to participate as well, that's always a great idea. Let's switch to the next page. Okay, the first story, the story in general is meant to prepare the students to understand the message of the Sunday Gospel by putting it in a familiar context. The story does not assume that the children have ever heard or know the gospel story. So in this case, people have an almost universal reaction to this Sunday's Gospel, and that's not fair. God pays people who begin work near the end of the day as much as those who work all day long in the hot sun. But this story is a way to introduce the idea that, that God's love is not about being equal, but about being just. So again, make sure that you spend some time here with the talk questions, because again, this is going to, especially that last question usually, is really starting to prime the pump for that gospel and for that gospel message for this Sunday. All right. Oh, one other note about the story. Sometimes we hear that there isn't enough time to read the story. Obviously, the gospel in this page 4 is the center of the lesson, but the story is important. And so there are some strategies for reading the story and going through that might speed things up a little bit more than just a traditional table read where everybody's taking turns, like every paragraph or two or every major section. If you read the story ahead and then you can summarize part of it and then have the students take turns reading towards the end, that can kind of speed up that portion of the lesson, especially if you have, say, like a 45-minute lesson. This lesson, we do pacing plans in the teaching guides for both 60 minutes, 90 minutes, and if you teach in a school setting daily, for like 20-25 minutes. So we have it apportioned that way, but we know that some people meet with less time than that. So again, that's a time-saving strategy while still retaining that key message in the lesson. So here we have the story of the gospel story of the workers, in which the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. And it's the story about the first hired get paid the same as the last hired, and they want to know why they want to express that isn't fair. So you can discuss that. That gets them primed for the discussion where we connect the gospel and doctrine and discuss how God's love is for all. It also introduces the idea, this is the first, I believe, of 3 straight weeks on parables, and specifically vineyard parables. All right, let's go to the next page, click here, and talk a little bit about the Our Catholic Faith feature. It typically is about something to do with the Mass or with church history, or it has something to do with one of the other readings for that Sunday. This week, it is about the liturgy. All right. This is important, especially for Visions students, because at this point, they're learning more and taking more leadership roles at Mass as altar servers, readers, cantors, etc., especially if you're in a school setting. And for the school-wide Masses, certainly students in 7th, 8th, and 9th grade are definitely taking important roles in the Mass. I also want to note here, this section here, if you've never taught the weeklies before, we have a Catholic faith word, a vocabulary word in every lesson. And it's really up to you. You can discuss the Catholic faith word. Most of them are included in our unit assessments. So you'll, if you're using the assessments, you'll want to pay special attention to that. The Catholic faith word is always highlighted and in boldface type wherever it occurs in the lesson. Typically, it occurs either on page 5, the Our Catholic Faith feature, or page 4 with the gospel and doctrine. I want to back up just one page because I missed here. This icon right here, you saw this before. This is the What the Church Believes and Teaches handbook. This is the indication that you should take out that book and do the portion of the lesson from the handbook. In this case, it's page 47, where you review the parts of the Mass or introduce the parts of the Mass, as the case may be with your students, to talk, and then also on they turn to page 20 to review what they might already know about the liturgy, or again introduce them to the liturgy for those who are less familiar. All right, let's move forward. All right, so this Sunday's gospel is about the kingdom of heaven. So we're going to flesh out a little bit the concept of the kingdom of heaven by using metaphor and helping them to understand with perhaps more familiar contexts. Okay. Great. I'm gonna go back. I apologize. We normally don't flip this much. One thing I want to note here, this is a new feature this year. We understand that there has been a marked decline in Catholics who report a belief in the real presence in the Eucharist. And this is an effort by our publisher and by the editors to encourage understanding and appreciation and reverence for the real presence. All right, so this would be an opportunity not only to read aloud this quote, but also to encourage the students to share it with their families. Typically on the last page of a lesson, we'll go to this last page, we also have the With My Family and Friends box. If you have students who are in the younger levels, the Seeds, Promise, and Good News levels, this box is called the Family Corner. But the things that are common here are the question of the week and the prayer for that week, which are both related to the gospel. But encourage your students to share both this box as well as that Eucharistic quote. All right, let's go back to the Living the Gospel activity. Again, that would be the Kingdom of Heaven activity. And really, it depends on the situation and how you're working this year, whether you're teaching a student at home or you're teaching a whole classroom, either in person or in a virtual setting. And whether you want to do it as a group activity or as an individual activity and then come together as a large group, that's really up to you. You know your students best. All right. And as an offshoot of that, because the Kingdom of Heaven activity talks about the rules and what guides a community, because this is likely your first class together, we want to talk about putting together a class covenant, what the expectations and the rules and the things that guide the behavior of the members who are of your visions class for this year. All right, let's go to the closing activity. This can either be used as a take-home activity or a pacing activity. If somebody, gets right through an activity and they're waiting for the other students to finish, this is something that you can assign. I want to emphasize this line right here. This isn't a test. This is the first week of your lessons. In your classroom, your students are not going to all have the same knowledge of the church and its traditions. They aren't going to have as much, they're going to have varying levels of biblical knowledge. So this is really just kind of to get an idea of what they know. I'd encourage them to work individually, but again, if you want them to work in small groups or in pairs, that is your call. All right, let's go on to the second lesson. Okay. Which is the 26th Sunday in Ordinary Time, September 27th, 2020. Again, we've got that green bar down at the bottom. The theme for this lesson is Jesus calls us to do his word. Activity prep. Just perhaps brainstorm some of the ways your parish and pastor used innovative ideas to offer care to parishioners during the pandemic. This will come up on our page 8 activity. So think about some of the things you did: parking lot masses, drive up sacrament of reconciliation, if you had parades or different things. It's the idea of how our pastors still ministered to their people, to their parishioners during the pandemic. So if you just kind of get those thoughts in mind, maybe jot a few down before class, that would be a great idea. The cover activity, just thinking about social media, the things yes or no, the things you say yes to in your life, the things you say no to, the things that you like, the things that you don't like, and perhaps share some of your own yeses and nos. Again, this is kind of rules to life. All right, the story for this lesson is this introduces the idea that keeping our word is as important. What we do is as important as what we say we're going to do. All right, let's go to the story. And again, this is a story about a young man who commits both to his baseball team and to his family, and how he balances his commitments and stays faithful to them. All right, make sure you do some good discussion about the talk questions to get ready for that gospel. And the gospel is the case of the two sons. So again, we're back in the vineyard. The question that you want to ask at the end, first of all, is with which son do you most identify? The son who says no, but then does come back and work in the vineyard, or the son who says he's going to, and then he doesn't? All right. The doctrine, make sure to spend some time with these same talk questions, and talk about a little bit about balancing all of their commitments. And this is a time when they're having to make choices between sports and maybe performing arts and just all the things that they're interested in, and how we balance that time and our commitments. How do we make sure that we're doing what we say we're going to do? All right. In the WCBT down here, Visions includes a lot of decision-making activities in the lessons. And this helps the students develop habits to make good choices. And this takes time and effort. So this is just a thing that we're going to practice over and over again. And the lesson or the pages in WCBT for this week are going to prep the students for the Living the Gospel activity on pages 6, 7. So make sure to go over that portion on page 30 in the handbook. So go over it until the young people feel that they understand the concepts. Right. As we discussed last week, the Gospels early on this fall are all parables, with most of them set in a vineyard. And this would have been a familiar location in Jesus' time. And that's how parables work, that they are a mirror held up to us with familiar characters and settings. And then we're called to identify, to find ourselves in the parable. It's holding up a mirror to our own behavior. Note again the Catholic faith word of church in the highlight within the text, as well as the Eucharist quote. All right. This is, again, an application of what the students have learned in their catechism handbooks for this week. If you're working on these lessons at home, I suggest that you go through each scenario together. If working in class or with limited time, assign scenarios to partners or small groups, and then have them present to the larger group. All right, let's go to page 8. Page 8 is either, it kind of rotates. We will have, in any given unit, we'll have a saint feature, a Catholic leader feature, which is obviously a contemporary Catholic leader. We also sometimes do prayer services. We'll do a specific feast day, just a rotation of different features. This particular week, we're talking about, we'll ask the children to share how their pastor or deacons continue to do their work even when parishioners couldn't attend church in person. And do any of these changes continue in their parish? And do they have any opportunities to participate in that? I'm thinking specifically of families who are calling people who are in senior centers, or they're acting as pen pals, just to keep that connection with some of the older, more vulnerable members of our parishes. Okay, let's go on to lesson 3, which is October 4th, 2020, 27th Sunday. We're still in ordinary time. The theme for this lesson is God calls us to grow and to bear fruit. The idea of responsibilities and making good choices. The cover activity, students at this age hold more and more responsibility, and let them assess all of the different places that they serve. And we didn't leave a blank space here, but they certainly could write, take notes on different areas in which they serve in their parish, just kind of in general, at home, or at school. Just to kind of get them thinking about the ways that they participate, or ways that they could participate. They could take notes as their fellow students are sharing. Let's go on to the story for this week. Actually, this one is an article. That's another note I want to make. Usually, this is either a fiction story or a nonfiction article, and we try to balance that out as much as possible. This week, we have kind of a student survey about what's hardest about being a teen today. So a little bit about the things that are harder and how they're able to make good choices despite the difficulty. So a little bit of story prep. Think about the challenges and the temptations you faced when you were the same age as your students. So think back 7th, 8th, 9th grade. Perhaps share a memory of a poor choice that you made and how it was resolved and what it taught you. So read this intro together and then give the students some time to read their peers' responses on their own and give them time to react. Then I want to point out here, there's a sidebar on ways to resist peer pressure. And go through these with your students. Ask them, are these realistic? Do you think these strategies would work? If you don't think they would work, why? Or what else do you think you would do, or what's been successful for you? All right. And again, make sure to go through those talk questions. All right, this is the parable of the renters. We're still in the vineyard this Sunday, third Sunday in a row. This continues the message that we are to be living an active faith. It is not enough that we believe, but we must put those beliefs into action. All right. Here we're connecting the gospel message to the doctrine. And like a farmer's care for the vines in the vineyard, God's love for us surrounds us and holds us. All right. This WCBT message in the Catechism Handbook talks about how the Catholic Church is apostolic. This leads to a discussion of the marks of the Church, that we are one, holy, Catholic, and apostolic. And this is probably going to be familiar for some of the students. You may see the light bulb go off over their heads, to explain to them, challenge to see if someone notes that the creed is where we profess our beliefs in these marks of the Church. All right, let's move on to the Our Catholic Faith feature. Again, this is going to be a little bit more of a discussion about parables, as well as this an explanation of the Sabbath. Make sure to give the students some time to answer the questions, working individually, and then either in pairs or small groups, and then returning back to the large group. I want to make a note here too. In both versions, the parent teaching page and in the teaching guide, we always include all of the materials that you'll need for that particular class. In this case, you will need student Bibles. You don't need a Bible for every student. You could definitely have them work in pairs. Or if your parish doesn't provide enough Bibles, you could also just proclaim this aloud and have the students listen to you. All right. Okay, let's move on to the next. This activity, 2-page activity, specifically talks about, it continues our study of the marks of the Church. The young people will review what makes us Catholic, the scriptures, the sacraments, our creeds, and our practices. And there are different activities here that you can go through either individually or as a group. See here the sacraments, the creed, and the marks of the Church. I also want to point out right here that the answers are either in the regular teaching guide or in the parent teaching pages. So the answers will be included in all of those. If we ever mess up as editors, we will include that, include corrections in the lesson update section on gospelweeklies.com. Or if you catch us and we've messed up on something and we haven't caught it yet and posted it in lesson updates, you can let us know at editor@pflaum.com. So it's editor@pflaum.com. And let us know. So if we haven't caught that error, we can get it posted for all the other catechists and teachers. Let's see. Let's move on to the final activity for this lesson. Again, like I noted last week, this page 8 was a Catholic leader feature. This week, it is a prayer. It's in recognition and celebration that October is the month of the Holy Rosary, and specifically this week is the celebration of the Feast of Our Lady of the Rosary on October 7th. And this is an activity that puts the joyful mysteries in order. So see if the students can put those in order. If they need a little help, you can find those, the prayers and the order of the rosary in the WCBT handbook on pages 52 and page 55 if they need a little help. All right. All right, this is our 4th lesson for Unit 1, the 28th Sunday in Ordinary Time, October 11th. The theme for this lesson is God sets a table for all. He invites us to his feast, but we must decide whether or not we will accept his invitation. Activity lesson prep, make sure to have pretzels or some other food for the activity. This will be needed to show disparity between the first world and developing nations in the lesson's gospel activity. If for some reason your parish or school setting does not permit you to have food as a part of your lesson, perhaps as a precaution against allergies, anything you can use to show those who have a lot and those who have nothing. So if it's slips of paper or buttons or beads or all right, just need to share my screen again. All right, and we're back. Okay. So this Sunday marks a transition from the gospel parables. While it's still all about inclusion, that everyone is invited to the feast, the message shifts to being prepared. This theme of preparedness will continue through the end of the liturgical year, and of course then into Advent, which is that season of preparation. Okay, let's see, we'll go through. So we have a survey activity of who they share meals together, and then a story about a shared family and a shared dinner for family and friends, a potluck. And then this Sunday's gospel reading is the parable of the wedding feast. All right, let's move to the doctrine here. Note the feast to which we refer is a meal, but it's also God's kingdom, the Christian community, as well as to the celebration of the sacrament of the Eucharist, that we are invited, but that we must actively accept and be prepared to accept that invitation. All right, the WCBT lesson is noted right here. You're going to get it's going to be easier and easier to transition. All right. Wait, this wants to time out. Technical difficulties today. All right, let's see if we can keep going with this lesson. Sorry about that interruption. Let's go to page 5. The Catholic faith word for this week is a very important one. It is the Sunday Eucharist, and what that means from the Latin. Again, you can introduce it before as an introduction to this feature, or when you encounter it in the text. All right, and then here, talk about some of the people that they regularly attend Mass with, members of their family, or if they're like my family, the people who sit around us every single week, because we act like we have assigned seats in our parish, which we do not, but just kind of that community, the people who sit around us in the same pews. They could also mention, of course, members of the choir, cantors, and obviously the clergy members at their church, their pastor or weekend presiders. All right, let's go on. This is the activity that I mentioned in the beginning, a little preparation. This is an idea to talk a little bit about, well, access to food and access to resources, depending on where you live in the world, and church teaching about our responsibility to share resources with all of our brothers and sisters. All right. With all of these activities, make sure that you read the introduction together, make sure that you read the rules and steps for the activity, and then set up the groups. I encourage this rather than having the kids form their own groups. You know how that goes. Friends get together, kids who don't know anybody are kind of left out. Let this be a place where everyone is included. Certainly in this lesson, make sure that this is a place where everyone is included. Okay. And then there's an activity to work on here. All right, and continuing in that, in the vein of that shared community and sharing of meals. This has become a very a big issue, certainly with natural disasters that we've had recently. This is as well as people who have had needed access to meals, including frontline workers in hospitals. This is a feature on Chef Jose Andres, who is the founder of World Central Kitchen. I want to point this out. This is something we're trying to work into our lessons this year, having a QR code. If you hover over this with a QR reader on your phone, it will take you to a video. It'll pop up on your phone or on a tablet and take you directly to a video. You really have options here. You can either watch it in class. I try to choose videos that are 3 to 5 minutes, so you know, aren't sucking up a lot of your time in the class, or it can be something that is a pacing activity. That's a little interruptive if you've got 1 or 2 kids who are watching a video and the other kids are still trying to complete an activity. So in general, I would either say view it together or send it home. This is also a nice way, speaking of the With My Family and Friends, there's also a QR code here that links parents to parent and family resources. But these QR codes are a nice response to what did you learn in class. The students can go, well, I learned about this man, and they can watch a video together. And it also reinforces the learning of the student. Okay, so I just wanted to go ahead and point that out. Let's move on to lesson 5, which is the 29th Sunday of Ordinary Time, October 18th, 2020. The theme is we are united in our one faith in God. We are both citizens and Christians. This is a good pacing activity. As the students arrive, you can assign it to them, get them thinking about what may be important to them. Sports teams, organizations, different labels, whether it's food labels, electronics labels, social media, stores, whatever. And then this isn't meant to be a fashion show, this activity with brands and labels, and certainly not ever to single any child out who isn't wearing the latest and greatest. And it's also just to talk about the things that they don't even know that they might perhaps be showing their allegiance to. You know, if they're wearing a high school jersey, something like that, they're showing their allegiance and their membership. Okay, let's move on to the article is about Father John Ryan, and it's about the basis of Catholic teaching about work and the dignity of work and workers' rights. Also about the concept of the common good. This is a little unusual that we introduce the Catholic faith word so early on in the lesson, but here it is. This week's Catholic faith word is the common good. So these are some really good real life questions that will definitely get them primed for the gospel lesson, which is give to Caesar and to God. I'm going to encourage you to go ahead and read that gospel background aloud to the students before you sing and prepare to proclaim the gospel. This will just give them a little more grounding in what's going on in the gospel before you proclaim it. All right. The doctrine then is more of a discussion of what we owe to God and what we owe to our communities. WCBT here, the Catechism Handbook, then rolls into an overview of Catholic social teaching, which is introduced in the story, and the long tradition of Catholic social teaching. Share with the students that this is not new. Many people trace the themes of Catholic social teaching, to Pope Leo the 13th and his writings in 1891. So if you want to point that out here, right there, in Rerum Novarum. All right. And then this leads into a discussion of the presentation of gifts, the offertory during Mass, and just kind of the history of where that tradition started. And then a discussion of where your parish or school gives its charitable donations, the different areas that your church supports. All right, let's go on to this. Oh, this is kind of fun. In Visions, we have the Attitudes, which is a student response vehicle where students at parishes and schools answer a question. If your school or if your student is interested in responding either to this question or to another question, you can send a request or a response to editor@pflaum.com. This week's question is, if you received $1 million, how would you spend it? And I don't want this to be like the question where if you had 3 wishes, what would you wish for? And then somebody says, well, I would wish for 1 million wishes. I want them to really think saving is wonderful. And it's a good idea to invest your money and save it. And I definitely value that idea as well. But I'd encourage you to have the students think about how they would really spend $1 million. How, if they had to spend every dime, who they would give it to, and what they would spend it on. So, okay, then the activity, all right, is setting a family budget. Or setting their own personal spending budget and a class spending budget. So you can ahead of time, if you want to, prep by cutting out these $10 bills, but really it won't take that much time to distribute scissors and do it in class. And really, you don't want to be chasing down all these loose pieces of paper. Sometimes it's valuable to look ahead and do a cutting activity in advance. I'm not sure that I would bother in this particular case. Let's see. See if I had any notes here. So you're setting a budget with a $100 allowance to determine your priorities and to learn how to balance what we save, what we spend, and what we share. All right, that's the concluding activity for this lesson. All right, let's go on to lesson 6, which is the 30th Sunday in Ordinary Time, October 25th, 2020. The theme for this lesson is Jesus teaches us to love God and our neighbor and to put that love into action. I don't have any activity prep noted in this lesson. I have a story prep note though. This story is about Irina Sendler. So this is a nonfiction article. But on the second page, again, I just wanted to note that QR code if you wanted more information about her life. You quickly jump right there. We're trying to link to as many different resources. If a story is really spoken to one of your students, this is a quick way for them to find out more. Sometimes too, if we're doing a story about a book and the student is really interested in the topic and wants to read the whole book, I will often try to make that link too, so they can get to where they could get that book quickly. All right, so in the story, this is a housekeeping note, encourage volunteers to take turns reading aloud the text and switch. I try to space these out, not only where the story transitions between scenes or times, but also so that it's every few paragraphs, so that no one is burdened with reading, 10 paragraphs and the next person reads 1. So that's a little bit of a teaching tip, I guess. All right. I would also encourage you, as you're reading the story, to ask the students, how does Irina Sendler put her love and care for others into action? And then make sure that you answer the questions together before moving to the gospel for this week. All right. Jesus gives two great commandments. People in the Bible are constantly challenging and questioning Jesus about laws and rules. Jesus boils down his teaching to a simple but difficult lesson. Love the most important law, the most important rule, love God, each other as yourself. Right. Again, we'll connect between the catechism, the doctrine, and the gospel. If we say that we love God, we must also love our neighbor. There is no fulfilling one commandment without fulfilling the other. And have a discussion about family rules. WCBT, the connection to the handbook this week is to turn to page 40 and to learn the major forms of prayer. This is just an introduction. Prayer is something that we do in every lesson, and we will continue to develop our skills in prayer, because again, that's prayer practice, something we need to develop. And the question to ask the students are, how do our prayers show love for others and for God? And which forms of prayer can you identify in the prayer of the faithful? And this is our bridge to the Our Catholic Faith feature, which of course is the prayer of the faithful. So you can introduce that Catholic faith word. They also have an opportunity to learn a little bit, if they haven't paid attention during Mass, to talk about where the prayer of the faithful falls within the liturgy, as well as what and whom we pray for. And they can also write their own prayers. All right, let's move on to the application of the gospel. How can we recycle love? And this is talking about the three parts of those commandments: loving God and loving our neighbors as ourselves. And then with that, they identify which of these actions, which of these three areas these actions fulfill. All right. And again, we talked about on page 8 that we have a variety of activities on this page 8. This is a saints feature, but we don't always have saints. Sometimes we have people who are on the journey to sainthood. For example, servant of God Julia Greeley, who was born in slavery in Missouri, was emancipated, and eventually moved to Denver, Colorado. And a little bit about her journey and her life. Again, there's a QR code here to watch a short video about Julia Greeley's life. And I believe this also talks a little bit about her cause for canonization. All right. Let's move on to lesson 7. We have 2 more lessons in this unit. This one is the lesson for All Saints Day, November 1st. Make sure to point out this is the only lesson in this unit that's not in ordinary time. So see if you have any eagle eyes who notice the change in liturgical color. Also point out that they might want to look for that when they attend Sunday Mass with their families, to notice that the color changes and where they see that in the sanctuary. The theme for this week is the Beatitudes are God's promises. I have a note here. There's no particular thing, activity prep, just to make sure that they have plenty of fresh markers, colored pencils, or crayons, because there are some drawing activities in this lesson. The cover activity, give the young people some time to review the quote-unquote Beatitude messages. There's some contemporary Beatitudes on the cover. Give them time to review them on their own first, and then come together to discuss and categorize them according to whom does God bless and whom can we bless. All right, let's move on to the story, room 111, which starts to get the students thinking a little bit more about the message of the Beatitudes, with, of course, we don't presume any knowledge of the gospel. So the idea, though, is that we're living in the Beatitudes in service to others, to encourage positive attitude to service, toward service. All right, let's go to the gospel for this week. For the Solemnity of All Saints, Jesus teaches the Beatitudes. The gospel, first time through, read it as written. Then the second time through, in every instance that you see the word blessed, substitute the word happy. And ask the students, how can we feel blessed or happy when we face terrible things? For example, you can contextualize it. In what ways has the coronavirus brought blessings? No, this is not to say that we want it, but how does our attitude change the way that we view the hard things in our reality? The doctrine, the idea that it gives us hope, and the Beatitudes are about the blessings that God promises to us. This week, the lesson in the handbook is about Jesus' law of love and the way in which the Beatitudes reveal God's love for us. All right, this week, the Our Catholic Faith feature is about the communion of saints, and this is obviously relevant to our celebration of All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day. Again, the note about the Catholic faith word, I think that it's introduced, go back to the previous page, the word Beatitudes, even though it's introduced on the cover, we try to put the Catholic faith word within the text to give it context. So either introduce it when you encounter it here, or use it as a review and in a way to emphasize and remind the students when you encounter it in the lesson. All right, so go through the activity or the read together about the communion of saints. All right, we have some more application of the Living the Gospel activity. Let's see if I have any notes about this. This activity connects, the second part of the activity connects the saints for All Saints with the Beatitudes. And there's a matching activity of how each of these particular saints lives a different Beatitude. Answers are in the teaching guide. All right. And this activity is both a prayer service, specifically a litany of saints, along with a drawing activity in which they can celebrate the saints in their families and among their friends. Someone who has, in this case, we're going to say someone who is living or dead. Right. And the idea is that they will create a quilt square, cut it out, and assemble them together. All right. This is the final lesson in Unit 1. It's for the 32nd Sunday in Ordinary Time. We've returned to Ordinary Time. Note the green band. And it is the parable of the wise and foolish girls, sometimes called the parable of the 10 girls. The theme, what is wise and what is foolish? The cover is a modern retelling of the Sunday's Gospel. It's written by an 8th grader, so go through and read that together and share an example of something wise or foolish you have done. You certainly can get the ball rolling with something that you maybe did that was wise or foolish, either recently or when you were the same age as your students. All right, and this story, I think you can maybe tell from the picture, and sometimes it's kind of fun to see if the students can guess what's going to happen in the story by looking at the illustration. See if they can kind of guess by looking at the illustration what is happened in the story or what is happening. One note I want to make before you begin the lesson, you may want to prep a set of cards. I'll quick flick to that. We have an activity with cards, And if you do this, I'd suggest putting them in individual baggies or clipping them with a little binder clip or paper clip so that you don't lose the little pieces. But sometimes it's just not worth it to spend the time cutting things out in class. So let's go back. So the story is the right side, and it's all about when we make poor choices. So obviously it's a pretty solid connection to the gospel about making choices. So we're nearing the end of the liturgical year in the church. So we're shifting to that message, emphasizing more that message of preparation and being prepared for the second coming of Jesus. And the doctrine for this week emphasizes the last judgment. Would we be ready for the final last judgment of Jesus if he returned today? And the last judgment is also the Catholic faith word. All right. So when we look at the WCBT for this week, that Catechism Handbook lesson, this Sunday's Gospel is a big metaphor. The wise girls are those who are prepared, believers who are prepared for the return of Christ. The bridegroom is Christ, and we all are the body of Christ. What does that mean? So the students will explore what it means to say that we are part of the body of Christ. All right, our Catholic faith feature continues. We're talking about the different parts of the Mass. This is how the first reading prepares us for the gospel. It provides also some background for the Sunday gospel. So if you choose, you could read this ahead of the gospel. But really, I think starting with the gospel on page 4 and then working on this on page 5, I think that this is still a perfectly viable order. Let's see, it's an activity based on the first reading from the Book of Wisdom, which reinforces that gospel message, prepares us to hear that gospel message about making wise choices. All right, let's move on to, well, we have the puzzle activity. This is something that could be sent home or used as a pacing activity. Make sure that you're sending, pointing out that with my family and friends activity or home activity, and then as well as the Eucharist quote. This is one of those cases where the lesson is out of order because we have 2 pages, front and back, of cards to play the wisdom game. All right, one other note about this puzzle. Sometimes puzzles also mean kind of assessments, not necessarily a test, depending on how you do or don't use assessments in your program. This could be a bit of a preparation for an assessment. All of these questions are taken from lessons in the first unit. Again, answers are in the teaching guide. As I conclude this overview of Unit 1, I want to remind you about the early start lessons, the 3 free online lessons that are available at gospelweeklies.com. They include a lesson plan as well as an activity page for your students. I also want to encourage you to share your story ideas at editor@pflaum.com. If you're doing interesting projects or there's something that you think that the editor should know about in terms of story ideas or things we should be covering, we hope that you'll share that with us at editor@pflaum.com. Thank you. Blessings on the beginning of this unusual year. We will be praying for you.
Hello, my name is Erica Diurkidi, bilingual editor for Pflaum Gospel Weeklies, and I would like to talk very briefly about our Visions bilingual lessons. This is the first year that we do this. We're very happy to add this to complete our bilingual program. First thing I would like to mention is that with your first package for bilingual Visions, you are going to receive our lessons on the bilingual format, one side in Spanish, one side in English. You are also going to receive the Spanish Catechism Manual. It's called Mi Fe Católica, one for each kid. And you will receive a teaching guide in English for this level. We have the teaching guide available in Spanish on our website, or if you like to ask your sales representative to send it in print to you, you can also do that. Let me show you how you can download this Spanish teaching guide from our website. You visit gospelweeklies.com and then you click on this menu on top, Browse, and you select the option Recursos en Español, Spanish resources. On this page, you are going to find anything that you need in Spanish for your Vision bilingual lessons, including the Spanish teaching guide. You can click on it and you can download it and print it. And as I said, you can also ask your sales rep to send you a printed copy. Here, you are also going to find the parent teaching pages in Spanish that Nicole mentioned for you to download and give in print to your parents, or you can send it to them via email. Another thing I would like to mention is that here on this page, you also will find the Spanish videos for each lesson to enrich your lesson. You're also going to find assessments for the lesson and the unit in Spanish, and many other things, seasonal resources for your children. Everything in Spanish will be here. And one last thing I would like to mention is that we also have available Spanish music. This is a brand new CD by John Berland. We translated the songs, and he found two wonderful Hispanic singers that recorded the songs. This is available for you on our website if you would like to have it. You will see that on the guide, on the Spanish guide, I'm suggesting songs from the CD. Of course, you don't have to have it, but it's a nice thing to have to complete your Spanish Visions program. If you have any questions, any issues with the guides, downloading them, any comments about the brand new Visions Spanish lessons, please send us an email at editor@pflaum.com. We would love to help you, and we would love to work with you through this first year of our Spanish Visions lessons. Thank you. God bless you.